What's going on, everybody? My name is Michael, and welcome back to Inside the Helmet. My dad, who usually joins for the show, should be joining us shortly, but I'm a little short on time today, so I wanted to go ahead and get the intro out of the way, as well as jump right into discussing Formula One, because typically, whenever we discuss Formula One on the show, that's more of my own personal interest, not something that my dad is all that interested in, nor does he follow it or is that knowledgeable of it. So he doesn't really have anything to contribute to that segment of the show. So I figured, why not just jump right in and talk about it? Because, boy, oh boy, we had some stuff to talk about. We had the race, the Canadian Grand Prix this past weekend. And oh boy, what a race it was. We had an incredible fight at the front. Well, first of all, it was a sprint weekend. And so we had a sprint race where the Mercedes came together and banged wheels a little bit. And that the whole incident of them fighting did end up causing Kimi Antonelli to come third behind Lando Norris and, of course, his teammate George Russell in the sprint. That's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. But then, if you thought that the sprint was going to have all the action, oh boy, the main race did not disappoint at all. We had, for the first half of the race, we had, of course, if you watched it, you know, big battle going back and forth for the lead between the two Mercedes of Russell and Antonelli. And then behind, you had McLaren absolutely messing up the tire strategy. It rained before the race, and so there was still some decision making on how wet is the track, what tires should we start on, and the McLarens, who had qualified third and fourth, had opted to start on the intermediate tire, banking on the track still being wet enough that would be the preferable option, whereas most other people around them were on either the soft or somewhere down the grid, towards like the middle, and then getting into the bottom 10 started on medium tires. So that did allow Lando Norris to get the jump on the Mercedes ahead of him and lead the opening laps before he and his teammate Oscar Piastri ducked into the pits to change their tires to the preferable dry tires. So that kind of messed up their race, and then Lando would go on to have a mechanical issue and retire from the race, and Oscar just was nowhere in Canada. It was unfortunate for any Oscar fans out there. But about halfway through the race, we had George Russell suffer an engine failure, and his car died. And so that left Antonelli essentially running his own race up at the front. He was 10 seconds ahead from what I believe to be maybe the most interesting thing to have happened, because obviously, a fight between Mercedes is great and all, but it's only so interesting. It's kind of like the McLarens of last year. It's like they're so clear of everybody else that it's only so interesting when it's just the two people from the same team fighting against one another, because you're going to have team orders. You're going to have them, being told to play nice to a degree. Whereas in the event of Hamilton and Verstappen fighting, as they were doing, after George Russell retired, that left Max in second with Lewis closing in on him, and that left them in a position where they were fighting each other for second place later on into the race towards the final 10 laps or so. Once Lewis had finally caught up to Max, Lewis was able to pass him and finish second, but Max did hold on to Not win the race. I wish. Hopefully coming soon. A Max Verstappen win to an F1 track near you. Um, but that did give Max third place and his first podium of the season. So, of course, without George having his mechanical issue, if Lewis had still overtaken Max, would Max have finished on the podium? Probably not, but that's racing. That's Formula One, and so Max, you gotta be in it to win it, and you even gotta be in it to finish on the podium. And Max was in it, so no fault of his own there. One driver I was a little disappointed in was Charles Leclerc, of course, Hamilton's teammate at Ferrari, who he finished fourth, which is not by any means a bad result, of course, especially considering Canada has notoriously been one of his weaker tracks. But I don't know, just the fact that he was nowhere near anybody else. He was too far ahead of Isaac Hadjar behind him, and he was too far behind the fight up ahead of him between Max and Lewis. So he didn't really get a whole lot of attention, which, yeah, I don't know. I'm obviously a Max Verstappen fan, so obviously my main attention is going to be on him always. But I like Charles. I'd say he's my second favorite driver, and so I always am rooting for him to do well as well. I mean, my ideal result would be a Max and Charles 1-2 finish. So, I always like when they fight each other. When they race each other, it's some of the most entertaining product that Formula One, in my opinion, has ever produced. Is a Max Verstappen versus Charles Leclerc battle. So a little disappointing that he wasn't in a position to fight either the people ahead of him or people behind him, but obviously still a good points haul if you are Ferrari. And what in the world is taking my dad so long? I apologize. We were supposed to do this, but I'm not entirely sure where he is or what he is up to. That's about it for Formula One as far as like this past weekend goes. In other news, the Mercedes engine, I've heard, whether it's rumors, whether it's actually fully legitimate, the Mercedes engine has been deemed illegal. So not only the Mercedes team themselves, but McLaren, Alpine, and Williams, the teams that share that same engine, that like buy the engines and use them from Mercedes, possibly going to be suffering a major setback. I'm not an engineer, and I'm not going to pretend to be one, and so I don't know all the technical things that go on inside the engine with the compression ratios. That's kind of the word that's thrown around, compression ratios. I don't entirely know what it means, and so I'm not going to make something up to sound smarter than I actually am. That's just not my area of expertise. All I know is that there was some exploit that Mercedes had found with the new nearly 50-50 engines that had allowed them to have this big advantage that they've had over other teams, obviously in tandem with their supreme aerodynamics as well. I mean, if you only have the good engine and the actual chassis of the car is garbage, then you're not going to have a fast car. You need both elements working really well, and Mercedes obviously had that better than anybody else by a mile. So hopefully this will knock them down a peg. I actually don't absolutely hate Mercedes, certainly not anywhere near as much as I hated McLaren last year and for the second half of 2024. They're not nearly as annoying about it, probably because of Kimi Antonelli. And also, actually, yeah, it's a really good comparison. Because in my mind anyway, the way that I'm thinking about this is that George Russell is the Lando Norris in this example where he's really annoying. He's a driver that I want to like. He's objectively fast. There's no doubt about his talent, but he's not very humble, and he's become very easy to dislike and to shame because he simply has no shame in a way. He will just rattle off whatever nonsense comes to his mind, and it's just embarrassing, honestly. Um, and then you have the other driver, Oscar Piastri, in McLaren case, and Kenny Antonelli with the current Mercedes, who is currently, early on in the season, outperforming their teammate who was looked at to be the championship favorite going into the season. I'd say the big thing that sets this Mercedes team a little bit above last year's McLaren in terms of like my personal annoyance with them is the fact that Zach Brown is just absolutely one of the most insufferable people I have ever seen on a TV screen. And Toto Wolff is at least not insufferable to that degree. Sure, is he smug? Is he a little arrogant? Absolutely, of course. I think in his position, you kind of have to be in order to be confident enough to be successful. But Zach Brown is just, you know, Zach Brown is just a chubby jackass. All right, I'm not a fan of his. I was watching the Indy 500 before the Canadian Grand Prix, and Zach Brown was there. Actually, not even at the F1 race. He was there at the Indy 500, of course, because McLaren also competes in IndyCar and whatnot. And he's the CEO of McLaren Racing as a whole, not just the Formula One team, I suppose. So, but I saw him there, and they were interviewing him during the race, during like a caution period. And that was enough to make me turn it off. I can't stand the guy. I can't. So, goodness, where is this man? Oh well. We had some really good stuff to talk about. We had some complications with doing the show the past 2 days. We normally record the show and post it on Wednesday evening. But Wednesday came around and had scheduling conflicts, and the same thing with yesterday, Thursday. And so here we are, Friday, finally gonna do it, and we actually had some things to really talk about, which is why I didn't just go ahead and do this show solo. But it's at a point now where can't really put it off a whole lot longer. Um, who wants a little coaching session? So all my footballs are in my car, so you'll have to bear with me here. But as we so as much as I love to talk about Formula One and just cars in general, football was my first love, obviously, and that's the majority of what we talk about here on the show. And that's what I have the most experience with knowledge wise, although I am rapidly gaining more and more F1 knowledge every day. But football, more than anything, is what I have experience with actually playing. And for those of you who do not know, if this is your first ever episode of Inside the Helmet, hi, my name is Michael. I've been a quarterback for well over a decade. I'm glad that you're joining us. It's not usually this dysfunctional. I apologize, but hopefully you're enjoying the show regardless. But yeah, I'm a quarterback, and I made videos on this before, but hello. Hey, there he is. I actually have already started recording. I went ahead.
Can't hear you.
I somehow hit the mute button on my microphone.
Hmm.
I've been rolling for almost 15 minutes already. In editing, I can black out your camera if you'd like, but you might want to shut that off if you don't want to have it on. Yeah. Um. Yeah, I already went and talked about the Formula One stuff, just because I don't have a lot of time, which is why I was wanting to get going early.
All right.
But yeah, I was just about to start giving a little lesson on throwing the football, but I guess that'll wait for the next time we have a little intermission or something like that.
Yeah. Sorry,
Because
I was waiting on the pizza delivery guy.
you did order a pizza.
Oh yeah.
Nice. All right, that makes sense. Well, why don't we get into our first planned football related topic for this week? And last couple weeks we've been talking about some of the people on the football field that don't always get all the attention. That being 2 weeks ago, we talked about offensive linemen, and then last week we dove into talking a little bit about defensive linemen. Now, I have very, very limited experience playing those positions, just doing so in youth football. But this is a position that we're going to talk about today that I have absolutely no experience with, and that is kickers.
Yeah.
Um,
Most people don't. They
mhm,
are ignored for 90% of the game
mhm.
and standing on the sidelines, and then suddenly you bring them in, and sometimes they decide the game.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say, with offensive and defensive linemen, they get no attention throughout the entirety of the game, throughout the entirety of their career, for the most part, unless they mess up. But with the kickers, it's like they get no attention, because they're over there on the sideline for 98% of the game. But then that little 2%, they're actually out there. 1% of that is for like kickoffs and stuff like that. But then that other 1%, well, when they're actually jogging out there to possibly decide the ultimate outcome of the game, that's when they have more attention on them than anybody else on that field at any one point in time.
Yeah, a lot of pressure. And my
Mm-hmm.
experience with kickers is they're kind of odd ducks as far as
Mm-hmm.
personality, and understandably they have to be
Mm-hmm.
because they they have so much pressure on them. And we're talking about field goal kickers here, and I also
Mm-hmm.
want to touch on punters, but the
Yeah.
field goal kickers for sure have all that pressure, and to handle that, they have to be able to block stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that carries over in their day to day personality. I've never
Yeah.
met I've never met somebody who was a field goal kicker who was normal in any way. They just can't be. And the funny thing is, if you look at the history of football, there was a time when it was not a specialty. Back in the 50s, 60s, they'd have offensive and defensive linemen who were the people kicking the extra points. It was really bizarre to see. And then I think it was probably early 70s, maybe. I know the Cowboys may not have been the first team to do it, but they brought in a soccer player named, he was a retired soccer player. In fact, his name was Tony Frisch. And he, instead of kicking straight on with the end of his cleat where the toes are, he was kicking with the instep. And Garo Upremian is another one of the early guys that they experimented with. And these guys, all they did was kick. And it changed the game. There was a brief time, thanks to a University of Texas kicker named Russell Erksleben, where the kickers would go barefoot on their kicking foot. They
Yeah.
claimed they claimed that, well, they could somehow feel the ball better with their foot, and that trend caught on for a while. But of course, you go out and play in the snow, and you got a barefooted kicker, and these guys who were dedicated to the barefoot kicking were like, no, I can't put on a shoe for this game. I won't be able to do it. So that trend eventually went away. But you have a little bit of experience as a holder
Mm-hmm.
of field goals. I think that
Yeah.
was what, in middle school or something you did that.
I mostly remember doing it in high school.
Okay.
If anything, I remember being kind of taught how to early on in high school, and then after I transferred and stuff to a new school, and they were still kind of learning more about me. We just happened to be in practice one time and be working on kicking, and I forget exactly how it happened, but I just happened to mention I think that that I had a little bit of experience holding, and so they gave me a shot at it, and I was all right enough at it, because I'd
Yeah.
actually been a little bit formally trained on how to do it,
Sure.
whereas the other people hadn't been. So they had me do that as well as being their starting quarterback. So and I distinctly remember there would be a couple times where we would score a touchdown during a game, and I would start to jog off the field, and then they'd go, "No, no, go back out there. You're the holder." I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah,
Well, and as a holder, because that's where the field goal kick, well, it begins with the center snap,
yeah."
but the holder gets down on one knee
Hmm.
and shows his hands to the center, gives him a target, and he snaps it back. And the holder, it has to be a certain rhythm to it that you have to
Hmm.
practice over and over again. That you catch it and put it the nose of the ball in the ground. And I know some kickers like the ball tilted backwards just a little bit from the top,
Yeah, that's
and you need to
pretty
spin
standard. Yeah,
it. You need to spin it so that the laces are facing forward, because the kicker didn't want to kick the laces because that would cause it to go sideways or not straight.
yep.
Um, so there's a certain rhythm to all of that. And I remember when I was a kid, I didn't understand that the kickers didn't just kick the middle of the ball.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people, if they're just goofing off and they're at a football field and they try kicking, they're like, well, how come when I kick it, it's just a knuckleball or it just kind of rolls on the ground? Yeah, they aren't realizing one the importance of the like tilting the ball back, because obviously when you kick it, the uprights are or the like crossbar is 10 feet in the air, so obviously
Hmm.
you have to kick it up at an angle, not just straight on. And
Right.
so tilting it backwards allows you to kick it like if you and it's pretty simple. If you hold something straight like this and you push it, it's going to go straight. Like if you're assuming it'll go perpendicular. Um,
Correct.
but then if you tilt it and it goes perpendicular, now it's going up.
Yep.
Very simple demonstration. But yeah, similar mechanic when it comes to the where you actually want to place your foot. It's not just in the middle of the ball, because football, in the grand scheme of things, is kind of small. It's not the biggest target in the world, and so if you were to try and kick it in the middle, there's always a very good chance that you'll accidentally kick the top of the ball,
Hmm.
which then obviously the ball is just going to bounce on the ground and not actually get any chance of going through the uprights. So,
And ironically, when you want to do an onside kick, a lot of times
hmm,
they do try to kick the top of the ball
yep, hmm,
so that it will immediately kind of nosedive into the ground and get that extra hop
hmm,
that they're always looking for.
yep.
So yeah, I was always kind of the belief, and I'm certainly I was never a kicker, and but I think you want to hit the bottom third of the ball somewhere in there.
That's around what I've heard as well. Yeah, obviously you
Yeah,
don't want to just kick the absolute bottom of the ball. It's somewhere about a quarter of the way up or so. A
yeah,
quarter to a third of the way up is where you ideally want to kick the ball to get
right.
the best angle. It's somewhere around the 45-degree angle or so that you
Yeah.
want the ball to take off at. So,
Well, and the original kickers just kicked it straight on. If
hmm,
you look at the old films, these guys literally would kick with
they
the
toe kick
very
it.
front part. They would toe kick it, yeah, from the
Hmm.
very front part of their shoe, from their cleat, and they just came straight at it
I
and
can't
kicked.
imagine that felt very good.
Well, they used some padding and that type of thing to help
What about the
their
ones that were
throws.
barefoot?
Yeah, well, by the time they did barefoot, the guys were using the soccer style, so they were kicking
Yeah,
with their instep,
I would hope
and
so.
I've never, I've goofed around like anybody else on a football field trying to kick, and I've never
Hmm.
really figured out exactly what part of my instep I'm supposed to be swinging, because when I swing my leg, uh, kind of sideways, I'm using different muscles than if I'm just kicking straight forward with my toe. And the people who play soccer and all that, they have that down.
Yeah,
They've been
it's
doing it
a
since
lot
they were
more
three
in the
three years
hip.
old. Yeah,
What
it's
I'm
in the
aware.
hip. Um, but there was there was one guy who, for many years, held the NFL record for the longest field goal kick in NFL history, and you can see it on YouTube. The He played for the Saints. His name was Tom Dempsey,
Yep.
and the what made Tom Dempsey's story so great was that he, I believe, was born with a club foot. I don't think it was a result of an accident as a child, but anyway, he was he didn't look much like an athlete. He looked like he had a spare tire around his midsection, and just kind of built like that. Didn't look like a football player, but he had a really strong leg, and because of his club foot, they made a special cleat where he was not a soccer style kicker, he was a straight on kicker. uh, they, in his cleat, to protect his club foot from any damage, they put like a little metal plate across, a rectangular plate across the front of his shoe, or maybe it was made out of wood, I don't know, but either way, it gave him a really solid striking surface that other people didn't have, and it allowed him to make the NFL as a kicker. And for so long, he was he had a 63-yard field goal for the Saints to beat the Detroit Lions on the last play of the game, and nobody could believe it. And um, it was thought at the time, boy, it's really going to be tough for anybody to ever beat this. And then suddenly, the rules changed, and kickers were allowed to, they weren't just having to kick whatever ball was out on the field at the time. I think currently, aren't they allowed to prepare 5 footballs? Maybe.
Uh, it's yeah, I don't remember the exact number, but it's not a ton of footballs. But they are
Yeah,
allowed to go and pre-prepare because there's something about the aerodynamics of the football when it's actually broken in and has been
yes,
prepared versus when it's just fresh out of the box that heavily impact the way that it flies because they used to just have to basically kick them straight out of the box.
right.
I think I heard Pat McAfee talk about this one time.
Yeah,
Um, and it's somewhat like kicking a brick.
yeah,
But once
and
when they're able to go and like soften the leather and kind of smoothen it out, it makes it a lot more aerodynamic and a lot better to kick. They can get better contact on the ball.
they can also control how many pounds of pressure are in the
That's
ball.
true. That too.
Um, I mean, it's got to make a difference if that thing is inflated regular pounds or if it's overinflated or underinflated. And some kickers
Mhm.
probably like it different ways.
Oh yeah.
But and I think as time has gone by, uh, they've the people who are now kickers are actual athletes. I
Yeah.
mean, they're, if you meet a kicker and you look at their quad muscles, these dudes are really working out, and they're just solid muscle. Now their brains are still, I said they're all odd ducks, and I stand by that. But they're actual athletes now, and so that's why you routinely see 55, 60, sometimes 65-yard field goals. I mean, look at Brandon Aubrey from the Cowboys.
Mhm.
This guy's making 60-yard field goals like they're nothing. And there was a time when if you'd go many seasons without even seeing anybody attempt a 60-yard field goal. So anyway, these the kickers in the game are, I don't want to say they're underappreciated because hey, if your kicker kicks field goal and wins the game, he gets carried off on the shoulders, even though his jersey is completely clean and he probably doesn't have a drop of sweat on him, and all these big brutal offensive linemen and stuff who are bleeding and cut and dirty and all of that, they're carrying him off and he's the hero and gets the microphone, you know. Uh, so it's a really interesting juxtaposition whenever you see the lineman carrying the kicker off. By the way, just since we're talking about kickers, I like to throw out weird historical stuff.
Okay.
The very first time I ever really paid attention to kickers, uh, I'm not sure if you saw this movie when you were a kid or not. Maybe I rented it for you, but it was the best field goal kicker of all time, who could kick a field goal even if you had the ball at your own 10-yard line.
Hmm.
He could line up and kick it, and it was a Disney movie called Gus.
I don't
Um,
recall.
Gus the Kicking Mule. Somehow or
Hmm.
another, through the use of Disney magic or whatever, that I don't remember the story. It came out in the 70s. It's probably not a great movie, but when you're a kid, it's great because somehow or another they got it okayed by the league that a mule could come out and kick field goals. And Gus the Kicking Mule could kick the football just the length of the field. And so it's a pretty predictable movie story. The sad sack football team that can't win a game now suddenly is scoring at least 3 points every time they get the ball because Gus can kick it the length of the field. Um, anyway,
Yeah,
so
I just like looked up Gus the Kicking Mule and read the little AI overview
yeah,
for it. That just looks ridiculous.
it's pretty silly. It's
Yeah.
but I mean, if you're a kid and it's fun.
Mm-hmm. And you don't
Um,
have a computer.
well, yeah. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but kickers, they can stick around for a long time. There's not a lot of wear and tear on their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing is, you will see kickers very similar to running backs. I think they'll be going along great, and then suddenly they're not great. We saw that happen with Dan Bailey with the Dallas Cowboys. He
Yep.
was one of the league's best kickers for years and years and years, and then suddenly, yeah, I don't know if it was an injury or he strained something or pulled something, and he got the yips, and he lost his confidence and he couldn't swing his leg the same way. And I think he may have even wound up getting released and signed with another team, but he didn't make an impact there and suddenly was out of the league. Most recently, we saw it with University of Texas graduate Justin Tucker.
Yep.
And he had some legal issues going on as well, but Justin Tucker was a Hall of Fame kicker, by any stretch, by any measure. And he suddenly had a season where he, instead of making 85, 90% of his field goals, he was making 55%.
I remember
And
that.
yeah, and because of his legal troubles, nobody wanted to sign him afterwards. Before we get off the subject of field goal kickers, by the way, just as evidence of how far kickers have come, we saw something last Thanksgiving that blew my mind. Uh, a person who is related in the family, my stepson, your step brother, Lucas, said, "Oh, well," and Lucas is a soccer player. He grew up playing soccer. We're at Thanksgiving, and Lucas said, "Well, I can make a 60-yard field goal," and we kind of laughed at him. And he said, "I'm serious." And we are like, "Well, let's go up to the local high school field and get some footballs and let's see." And he did it. And he was not ever a kicker in football, even at the high school level. He didn't kick for his high school team. He just played soccer.
I was about
And
to say he just played soccer, didn't he?
yeah, and apparently, a good soccer player, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
somebody like Lucas who has never, we kept telling him, hey, you need to go try out for somebody somewhere. If you're if you're kicking 60-yard field goals in your spare time, I realize it's different if you actually have people rushing the ball and
Of course.
pressure in the crowds and all that. But the ability to kick a 60-yard field goal, I believe me, 20 years ago, there were not very many people who could do it. And now you've got somebody like Lucas who never really played football
Mhm.
is out there doing it. So I wonder,
Yeah.
there's got to be a dynamic where you get to a point where you just can't physically kick a football any farther. Um, there's got to be a physics part of it.
I
It's
think
just like you can't throw a wiffle ball as far as you can throw a baseball because it
mhm,
doesn't have the weight. And the same
yeah.
thing, there's a limit.
Mhm. I think you probably haven't heard of him, but there's a YouTuber by the name of Mark Rober who is an engineer, and he
Hmm.
actually built a robot one time many years ago to test that, see how long of a field goal you could kick,
Yeah.
using obviously superhuman strength. And then he ended up taking it to the Lions field to put it head to head against Matt Prater while
Hmm.
he was still with them. And it was many years ago. It's been years since I've seen the video, so I don't entirely recall how it went. Although obviously the robot kicker was able to kick it a lot farther, but
Sure.
there was a limit where like the air resistance would slow it down because and like the robot couldn't overcome it because it was already kicking at so much force that it was gonna break the robot to try and exert any more force.
Yeah, they would have to change the ball.
Mm,
And honestly, do we want to see 80-yard field goals?
mm,
A team gets a ball,
occasionally, yeah.
makes one. A team gets the ball, makes one first
Hmm.
down, and then kicks a field goal. I'm
Yeah,
not sure
it
that's
wouldn't be
good for the
very good for
game.
the game of football. I think they would need to extend the field another like
Yeah.
50 yards.
One of the interesting things that we've talked about before, and then we'll talk about punters, is
Hmm.
having a football version of what the NBA has with the 3-point line. Um,
Hmm.
I think it would be interesting if you got more points depending upon where you kicked from. But every time I try to make that argument, I think, well, do you reward the offense for driving further down the field so that it's a shorter field goal? I mean, there's an argument to be made that maybe you get 4 points if you're kicking from a certain distance because it means that your offense earned that. But yeah, it makes more sense, more logical sense, I think, if you say, well, no, the longer the field goal, the harder it is, so the more points there should be. But imagine a team that's down by 4 points at the end of the game, and they're too close to try a 4-point field goal, and so they intentionally take a loss on the play.
It would create
That
a
would
very interesting extra layer to it, but I, I I like that you're pointing out kind of the duality of that situation. That ultimately is leading me to say just leave it as is. It's too complicated.
Yeah, I think one time we were talking about it, and maybe it was you that suggested maybe you get one 4-point field goal per game. And
I think.
if you want to take it in the first quarter from,
Mhm,
25 yards out, go ahead.
mhm.
Or if you want to save it, just like you have to save timeouts
That would be
for
interesting.
for the end of the game.
I think what you may be thinking of is when we had Ty on the show a few weeks ago,
Yeah,
we were talking about kickoffs,
right.
and I suggested that you should get a point. You could get a point if you on a kickoff kick it through the uprights. You get a point for every player of your uh, team that you take off the field.
Yeah, because if you
Hmm.
don't get it through the uprights and they return it,
Yep,
and
it's gonna be
and
harder to tackle them.
you've taken 5 players off the field, they're
Hmm.
probably going to return that for Auburn versus Alabama touchdown
Yep.
from the Iron Bowl from a
Hmm.
dozen years ago or whatever it was. So,
Hmm.
real quick on punters.
Yeah, real quick, and then I'm probably gonna have to
Okay.
go.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's fine. Real quick on punters. uh, having coached youth football in the league that we have, we don't actually have punts, so I don't
Mm,
have to coach kids, but they'll be out there just warming up before the game and practice and throwing the ball around. And invariably, some kid will punt the football to someone else. And I think the thing about punting is it happens so fast that if you don't know how to do it, people think that you just kick it with the top of your foot. I've seen little kids who take the ball and put two hands on it and then throw it up in the air and then try and time as the football's dropping, down, and they try to kick it and it doesn't work. So first of all, let's be clear. Punters do not throw the ball up in the air.
no,
They
they do not.
they precisely drop it to a
Hmm.
certain spot.
Yep.
They catch it, they spin it to get the laces on top, and they have, one step, two steps, however many that they've decided to do,
Mm.
depending upon how heavy the rush is. And they drop it to a certain place. And what they're trying to do is to hit the outside third or quarter of their kicking foot on the outside. Because if you do that, it not only can create a lot of velocity when you swing your kicking leg, but it will spin the ball.
Yep.
And I've seen punters before who are so good at it that the spiral that they can get on occasion on a punt is even similar to what a quarterback gets.
Hmm.
And the ones who are really good at it can control. Okay, I need to kick it 50 yards, but sometimes you're trying to pin the other team deep, and you've gotten the ball past midfield, and you don't want to kick it 50 yards because you don't want it to go, out of the back of the end zone. And so they can control how far they're kicking and then the direction. Of course, in the punting game, it's really important that your punt coverage team knows, is the guy going to kick it down the middle or to the left or to the right, and that's how they set up the defense on the punt coverage team.
Yeah.
And I don't
No,
know,
they'll
I
usually shout it out as well to
yeah,
help them. So that
yeah,
you don't have your coverage players running down the field looking up trying to find the ball.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I always thought that the least pressure on a football team has got
Punters.
to be the punter,
Oh, easily.
because everybody knows from time to time a punter will miss, they'll shank the ball.
Hmm.
If they get the punt blocked, it's usually not their fault. It's somebody
Yeah.
missed a block.
Hmm.
And punters, other than Pat McAfee, who you mentioned before, really are not involved in tackles. Uh, and they just kind of come out, I don't know, 8, 9 times a game, maybe less, depending upon how well the offense is doing. And if the game is close at the end, the punter can just go put on a baseball cap because, okay, they're not going to punt ever again
Yeah.
if you're behind. Those guys make probably the least money on the team in the NFL,
Out of the
but
starters, yeah.
yeah, out of the starters, and they don't have a whole lot of pressure on them. So,
Hmm.
hey, guys, if
Yeah.
if you're if you're a kid out there listening and you're saying, "Well, I'd love to make the league and not have a lot of pressure and make more money than I could probably make sitting in most office cubicles," learn how to punt.
Hmm. Not a
And
bad gig.
not a bad gig. You get to travel. You get to be a member of the team. You have a not a whole lot of fame, but a certain level of fame, and you
Mm.
probably are going to have a nice house and a nice car, and
Yep. Hmm.
So
Well, yeah.
anyway,
Be a punter. That'll be the message we leave you with to sit
yep,
on for 5 days until we're back.
right.
Well, with that, thank you for tuning in to a late episode Inside the Helmet. We'll be back next week, hopefully, regularly scheduled Wednesday evening. But with that, thank you for watching.
God bless.